Let me read to you a passage from the 13th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 24 to 30. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the 16th week in Ordinary Time, Year 2. St. Matthew writes, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed ears, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from? An enemy did this, he replied. The servants asked him, Do you want us to go and pull them up? No, he answered, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, First collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. That's from Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 to 30. And what does it suggest to us? Well, I am convinced that one of the most universal of problems is that of bitter memories. As people grow older, difficult and hurtful memories can crowd their minds. If they do not learn to control those memories and cast a new and higher light on them, their lives will be blighted with suffering. Wise counselling can be of immense help, but each person must take his own case in hand and strive to look on his painful memories in a higher way. Those who caused the injuries that are being remembered will gradually die off, and still the painful memories can remain unresolved. It is an aspect of the problem of evil as felt by the individual. There is no simple answer to this, and yet those memories have to be controlled and healed. Well, a few great facts ought to be kept in mind by the one suffering in this manner. Firstly, the ultimate cause of suffering is sin, either sin within oneself or sin outside of oneself. As St. Paul writes in the letter to the Romans, sin entered the world through one man, and through sin death, and death has spread to the whole human race. So death and all that leads to death is ultimately due to the sin of man. Christ suffered incomparably, and his sufferings were due entirely to the sin of the world, outside himself. He was absolutely sinless, and yet he suffered more than any other. The case is different with us. We cause suffering to others, and they cause suffering to us. But whatever is or has been the suffering, whether caused by us, or by others, or by a combination of both, which is usually the case, the ultimate cause is sin. While in the first instance, our Lord's parable today that I read is about those who are good, the wheat, and those who are bad, the weeds, and the judgment of God on each. For our purposes here, let us make a further application beyond that made by our Lord, and use the weeds of the parable as an image of sin. And let us apply it to our hurtful experiences. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed ears, then the wheat also appeared. In life, wheat grows side by side with the weeds. There is a tradition in Christian thought that judges man to be wholly and entirely corrupted and sunk in sin. If by this is meant that by nature there is no good in man, I deny that this is revealed doctrine. Man is not totally corrupted. Rather, man is profoundly wounded by sin, to the point where, by nature, he is subject to ignorance, to suffering, and the dominion of death, and is inclined to sin. there are both weeds and wheat within each man. While due to the work of Christ, grace now abounds the more, nevertheless, there are the weeds of sin. The weeds of sin are everywhere among the wheat, and sin is the common malady. So when a person's life is burdened by the painful memories of past hurts, let him remember that the sin which all have inherited from our first parents is present in his life and also in the lives of those who have hurt him. Due to this common malady, we have been hurt by others, and others have been hurt by us. Indeed, more often than not, the hurts from which one suffers are due to sin both in others and in oneself. You know, I think this thought of the common malady of sin can help those who suffer be more forgiving of those who have hurt them. There are weeds everywhere, and as the master of the field in the parable says, an enemy has done this. That enemy has gained a foothold in every man and woman, and the result is unhappiness and suffering for all. The one who has hurt us suffers from this malady too. Sin must be renounced, but due to this common malady, we all suffer from the hurts and injuries we inflict on one another to a greater or lesser extent. We share a common burden. In our pain, let us be understanding. There is this further fact that is more important than all. In the parable, the field which has both wheat and weeds has at the same time a master, an owner. This can remind us that there is one master in whom we can trust. In the midst of our hurts, we can trust that he will guide our path to its proper end. His love is active in his providence. So let us not only recall the harsh elements in our life, but also the good things which God has done, which he is doing, and which he will do. The providence that has been at work and which will take us to the end. All this is to say that we ought to remember the fact that while sin has passed to the whole human race because one man sinned, yet at the same time God is at work bringing us to our good. There is wheat in the field, but many weeds as well. An enemy has done this, as the owner of the field in the parable says. St. Paul wrote that God brings together all things for the good of those who love him. We can trust in him, and looking back on life, we can see his providence at work. That is a sign of the much better things which in the fullness of time God will bring us to. Let us then be forgiving and trust constantly in God,